Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mer Herosner podcast, episode 6. I'm your host, Vic and Mike, and as always, I'm joined by my beautiful co-host, Mike Balian.
Wow, what an adjective. What was that for?
Well,
I feel a little special.
you are special.
I don't look my prettiest tonight.
Well, it's okay. I like the rough look. Where we dive into our great Armenian history and discuss different eras, kingdoms, topics, and great people. So, Mike, are you ready for part 2 of Tigran?
Yes. I hope everybody else is ready.
Yeah. So, before we start, again, I want to mention our giveaway. We are giving away a Tigran shirt and a mug. Basically, it's kind of like a raffle system we mentioned in our part 1 of this episode. All you have to do is send us your name, last name, and email. You can send it through Instagram, which is at Mer Herosner. And for the spelling of Mer Herosner, it's MERHEROSNER. Or you can email it to pod at merherosner.com. And then the deadline is the 12th at midnight. And then we'll announce the winner on the next episode. So last episode, we left off with
the Parthians and the Romans.
This was campaign in the West, right?
Yes, campaign in the West, where the Parthians and the Romans were more or less almost kind of trying to come together and take advantage of the internal issues that Tigran was having with some of his sons and Mithridates' daughter, Cleopatra, or his wife. And because of certain major issues internally with the Romans, with the gladiator uprising, Spartacus and whatnot, during this time era, the Romans kind of backed off, and the Parthians, from the sound of it, were left kind of wondering, like, okay, what do we do? Yeah. Right? So that's where we're going to pick up.
Okay.
All right.
So now we're picking up where it's basically about the Armenian Empire.
Yes.
So basically from 87 to 85 BC, Tigran's army entered into Mesopotamia, specifically the northern part. I think it's the province of Korduk and Mygdonia and Adibeni.
Yes.
Which was under Parthian rule, by the way. So the kingdoms of Orsoyen and Atrapatakan.
Yeah, which is basically, it sounds like it. It's like Azerbaijan Azerbaijan. That territory.
So here's the thing. They also pledged their loyalty and support to Tigran. In 83 BC, after some bloodshed, Syria, which was governed by the Seleucids, the Syrians chose Tigran as their protector and offered him the crown of Syria, supported by the local aristocracy. Tigran granted autonomy to those cities in the growing Armenian Empire who could mint their own currency. The Syrian mint included the coin depicting the emperor Tigran
the Great.
Yep.
So, you see what's going on is a lot of these people started pledging their allegiance or support for what Tigran was doing outside of Greater Armenia. Now, all this area that you're talking about, that you've mentioned, is basically south and east of Greater Armenia, or the main Armenian highlands, right? So as you see, he's kind of expanding south and east, not just west, because we were talking about his conquests to the west in the last episode, right? That's how we concluded. Now he's going south, and he's taken on not necessarily conquering,
not just south, north as well.
Yeah. But he's kind of starting to use his diplomatic clout to get these people to kind of acquiesce, I guess. Not necessarily bow down, but like, okay, we're okay with you, right? We're good. And certain promises are probably being made and whatnot, right? So according to Justin, the Roman historian, which we mentioned in the last episode in part 1 of this series, Tigran reigned for 18 years on the Syrian throne. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he was the Syrian king, but they, as you just mentioned, they kind of granted him almost like, okay, you can be our leader type of deal, right? Yeah. I don't know the exact specifics as to, did they really call him king or what, but the Syrians basically just kind of handed over the keys to their lands, right?
Yeah.
So During this time, the Armenian forces had conquered the kingdoms of Commagene and Kilikia, or Cilicia, as I think that's how it's pronounced in English. Cilicia? Cilicia?
English,
or whatever?
they tend to say Cilicia.
I've just, your whole life
It's
you say
Kilikia.
Kilikia, yeah. Once in Syria, he was confronted with a new foe, Queen Alexandria, ruler of Palestine. As Josephus, a famous Romano-Jewish historian who lived from 37 AD to 100 AD, noted, she was, and I quote, she was a really shrewd individual and increased her army with a great body of foreign troops, which made her nation very powerful and terrible to deal with. So it sounded like she was, I'm not messing around. Whoever this, I mean, I didn't do too much historical research on who she was and what she was all about, because again, we have a lot of things to cover in this. But it would be interesting to look into her, just as a side note, if, for any of the listeners, might want to check that out.
Well, I mean, her troops actually took Damascus during this event. Tigran was forced to actually neutralize them. So Tigran personally led the expedition in Phoenicia and Palestine.
Which is massive, because Phoenicia, if anyone knows even the slightest bit of history, the Phoenicians were famous for their naval strength and being dominant on the eastern side of the Mediterranean.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, after this event, they quickly took Acre in Phoenicia, which is located modern day Israel right now. It was a very, very famous port city, by the way. What do we know really about Phoenicia in the ancient times, to be honest with you? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, so Phoenicia again. The Phoenicians were a very powerful force in trade, especially in trade routes through the Mediterranean. I guess according to our historical narrative, we know and have learned that the Phoenicians had one of, if not the most powerful fleet.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that. They were known in history to, like you said, the most powerful naval fleets.
Or power, or whatever it was. I mean, I guess you can kind of dive into who was stronger, was if you were to have it during the same time, with the Phoenician fleet or the Spanish Armada, I mean, really, the Spanish Armada was known as the most powerful, possibly, fleet of naval power in our known history.
Well, not according to this.
Well, I mean, I know the Phoenicians were strong. Again, if they were in the same timeline, like, who would win, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. They did have cannons, Spanish Armada.
Well, then it couldn't have been the same time.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So if it was during the same time, okay, let's say, hold on. What if the Phoenicians went to, like, I don't know, like the 13 or 1400s?
Well,
or let's say the Phoenicians existed. They would have had cannons.
Oh, yeah, of course.
See?
So, depends on who had the biggest ships.
I guess.
Yeah, okay, we're really getting off subject right now. So,
okay.
All right. Where were we? Yeah, so we're talking about them having the biggest, most powerful naval fleets at that time. Yeah.
And then some important info about Acre, right? It's still a port city in modern day Israel, and it was constantly being sought after and conquered by many, many different leaders around the world at the time. Why? Because it was a strategic place for trade and a bustling city at the time. And it was most notably conquered by Cleopatra, not Tigran's wife Cleopatra,
the actual
Cleopatra, and different time periods, not during this time. And, it was basically everybody wanted this port city. Yeah. Everyone seemed to it's like, well, it's my turn. And everyone was kind of like conquering each other. Yeah. I did a little bit of research. We're not going to talk about it, but from what I saw, a lot of prominent leaders during that time era between the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD look like this city changed hands between a bunch of people.
Well, I mean, trade in general, especially back then. I mean, even now, it's one of the most important parts of a successful economy, So obviously, any kingdom, king, queen would want that port for their own advantage, for their own riches.
And besides it being a big port hub, it was also the capital city of the region at the time. Basically, it was a capital city of Palestine,
Yeah.
So Josephus the historian wrote that Queen Alexandria, and I quote, presented Tigran with many valuable gifts and also ambassadors. So she basically pledged and offered her loyalty, so she was a foe no more.
Yeah.
Right? So it makes you think, like, how powerful was our army? And I keep saying the Armenian army,
Yeah.
right? The imperial army, that someone like this, who was considered a thorn in the side again, right? According to what we've read.
Who gave him trouble?
She
definitely,
for a little bit,
yeah,
and
for a
she
little
was
bit,
kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna back off, and here you go, like I'll be on your side, you know.
Yeah. So basically, I guess after these successful campaigns, you can call them, in and around the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, the Armenian warriors had a big reputation throughout the Near East, even with the Romans. Strabo, and we talked about Strabo, Greek historian, wrote, "The fight on foot and on horseback, and both in light and heavy armor. The horses are also protected with armor. They use javelins and bows, and wear breastplates, shields, and coverings, and they have a passion for riding and taking good care of their horses."
There's the horses again.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I know we discussed this. I believe it was in the Urartu episode, right, where they were very big on taking care of their horses and what you know, the way they handle them and the maintenance of them, and
again, this is from Tigran learning about,
yes,
you know, from the Parthians.
Many, I mean, of course, and you know, you know, talking about how they took care of their horses in previous centuries. We're talking about a 6, 7, 8 century difference. So this must have been something that kind of stuck around over time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Now, Plutarch, basically, who's a famous Greek philosopher who lived from 46 to 119 AD, actually wrote that the Armenian archers could kill from 200 meters with deadly accuracy.
For our American audience who don't know what 200 meters is, that's about 700 feet.
Wow.
As their campaign continued south, Tigran's imperial army began to turn its attention even further south. A campaign in Africa, out of all places. Yeah, that's how far south they wanted to go. Okay? Egypt was in a lot of turmoil. Seemed like a lot of people were in a turmoil
Like
at
he
the
had
same
a big
time.
appetite, man,
Yeah.
honestly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so Egypt had basically weakened significantly because of internal issues. Many territories and peoples leading to the borders of Egypt had already pledged their loyalty to Tigran on the way. It was almost like the guy was sweeping through the area. And
I think it was almost like they heard he's coming, so they were like, we're not even going to put up with this, you know?
Yeah, but it just sounded like, from the sound of all this, it sounds a lot more like there was more diplomatic bowing down to than warring and killing and suffering. I mean, again, there might be, but
I'm almost imagining like him showing up at the gates, and they were already, obviously they already knew that he was coming, you know, through messengers and everything.
Sure.
And it was just like they already had planned how to just accept him and give him power, basically, or rule over their area.
Yeah, and again, while he was sweeping through some of these cities on his way down to Egypt, or like the northern part of Africa, he even conquered what back then was known as Berithos, or modern-day Beirut.
Wow.
So I mean, think about it. Tigran kind of had his hands all over Beirut too, or what is now known as Beirut.
Yeah. Well, there is a large Armenian community there.
For sure. Maybe they've been there since then. Don't know. Anyway, so now let's move into after all these conquests, you know, he's not just going to stay south. Now he's got to think about everything that he's conquered, everything that he's taken over diplomatically, non-diplomatically, whatever the case is. He started to focus on possibly building a new capital city. Because initially, the capital, or during all of this that we've been discussing in the first episode and now, up until this very point, was Artashat, which is located in a little south of where Yerevan is today. Yeah. Right? But the interesting thing about where Artashat's location was, and this is why they were, and we'll find out why they were thinking about possibly looking for a new location for the capital city of the empire, it wasn't nestled in a heavy trade route. So the city wasn't really growing. It wasn't in a cultural center. It wasn't in a, a hustle bustle of people going back and forth and whatnot.
It wasn't positioned where it would geographically be beneficial for them in many ways. So basically,
I mean,
typically, if you have a big empire, you want your city to kind of the capital to be almost in the middle,
basically.
So that way, and from the way they used to, the architecture was always you had the main city, right, the capital, and then everything kind of almost like build around it, like smaller cities, so forth. And they were always from that tend to be in a I don't know, obviously Spanish architecture versus Mediterranean architecture or Armenian was different, but they're almost like if you look at for example Spain, right, like what is it, just all squares, right?
The blocks. If you ever look at it from like Google Maps or something like that, Paris is the same way too.
Well, Paris also, if you look at it, Paris also has like kind of almost like a circle.
Well, that's around the Arc de Triomphe, and then it just kind of like sprouts out from there, almost like it's a star. So right, if you ever look at it from above,
so it's kind of the same thing.
Yes, So and if you looked at it geographically, even today, if you look at where Artashat was in comparison to the ancient Greater Armenia map, you have Artashat kind of off in the eastern side of the empire. Way off in the eastern side of the empire.
Which is not good.
No, considering how much he expanded to the west. And to the south. So it was, and again, like you mentioned, you kind of want to have everything more centered. Right? And strategically placed on trade routes, popular or big time trade routes where you have a lot of traffic, merchants trading, whatnot. Different flavors coming in. You have a lot of people acquiring trade, and so him and his high priests were kind of looking at, and his architects were kind of looking at different areas to explore, and they found what we now know as, drumroll please, Tigranakert, right? So the city of Tigran. I guess kings can do that. You could just like pick a certain place on a map and be like, this is where I want my city.
And name it after
myself. Or else I shall conquer you. Tigranakert would become the cultural center of the Armenian Empire. Now, one very important thing to note is that this is not the Tigranakert that is located in Artsakh currently.
No.
You can type it into Google and it might come up as what's in modern day Artsakh. That's not the one. So the city of Tigranakert is modern day, I believe it's called Diyarbakir in modern day Turkey. And
there is an Armenian name for that.
Which was?
They pronounce it differently.
Maybe. I don't know. It's just what I saw up on. Or
I could be wrong. I don't know why I remember seeing something like that. That there is an Armenian name for it now, but it could be Tigranakert as well. I could be mistaken.
Huh. Interesting. So Tigranakert was located west of Van Lake. Which strategically, as you mentioned earlier, would be in more or less the middle of the entire Greater Armenia or imperial map. And interestingly enough, this is a little quick side note, where Diyarbakir or what used to be known as Tigranakert is located. If you look at the map, there's a couple cities called, like, in and around the area. There's one specific city called Batman, literally the spelling of Batman,
Batman,
like Batman. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Batman.
Okay.
That Batman.
Yeah, that Batman. Not the other Batman, that Batman.
That Batman, okay. Yes. That city actually tried to sue Warner Brothers for, it's a wild story. I'm not going to get into it. You guys can Google it. Just Google the city of Batman sues Warner Brothers and you'll get a good laugh. I promise. I promise you. Christ. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's literally right next to where Tigranakert used to be located.
Wow.
Yeah. It's.
Then they sued Warner Brothers.
I think they tried to.
For what?
I again, I'm not going to get into it. This is going off on a tangent, but if for any of our listeners, just go Google it. You'll get a fantastic laugh.
Wow.
So apparently so did Hollywood.
I'm going to Google it.
Yeah, it's great.
I didn't even know about
that. It's a true story. It's not,
wow.
This is not fallacy.
Okay. Wow. All right. Well, during the 70s BC, I guess, the Armenian Empire was at pretty much its pinnacle. Tigran began the construction of the city of Tigranakert. The building and the planning of the city was like carefully chosen, and it was nestled in a crossroads of many trade routes and in the ancient world, specifically from the west to east and vice versa. So again, like, you know, that was the whole point of choosing that location. This metropolis was, you know, surrounded by thick walls. I think somewhere around 25 meters in height.
Which is about 80 to 85 feet.
Yeah,
Those are big walls, man. That's an 8-story
Talk
building.
about the construction of that.
That's an 8-story building.
Yeah. That's. I mean, 80. Yeah, 80 to
more or
85
less.
feet.
Yeah.
And the royal palace was on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by beautiful gardens. So, you know, many people began to move to Tigranakert for trade and opportunity, because it kind of became what he dreamed to be the center of, you know, trade and you know, the economy blooming. And
it's like any modern city, right?
Yeah.
The bigger it grows, the more people want to flock there for opportunity, whatnot. Just like, you know.
And the cool part is, like, once it started building and you know, people started occupying, I guess you can say, Tigranakert would be home to nearly 100,000 people. You know, that's a big city back then.
Yeah, that's a lot of people from back then.
I mean, if you think about it, Tigranakert must have felt like the, you know, images we see in many movies that depict ancient civilizations, most notably like ancient Rome, where you had trade and merchants, you know, crowding the streets, theaters, the actors, the entertainment, etc. Like, you know, I can even imagine, like, the, you know, the sounds of the instruments.
Yeah,
of, you know,
the
like,
things that we saw. Let's say, I mean, again, movie reference. We're by the way, guys and gals. Yeah. We're big movie guys, so we might throw in a lot of, like, movie references here and there, but it's just something to like visualize what we're trying to explain.
So here's the cool part. Remember Tigran's youngest son, the one who didn't betray him?
Yeah.
You know,
Artavast.
Yes. The theater.
The
theater guy. He would actually head the entertainment of the city.
Why am I not surprised?
Well, I was just gonna say surprise, surprise. So we are going to the theater, theater and whatnot, which, you know, further attracted many to flock to the city of Tigranakert. So it was kind of like, you know, he was trying to make it to be the Vegas, I guess.
I guess. I mean, look, it can't just be a drab city with without glam and glitz. You gotta have the glam and glitz
back there too. I mean
sure. You know, they drank whatever they drank. They sat around.
Well, wine. They
music.
Drank wine.
I'm sure they had
and beer.
Ale. They had ale.
Ale. Well,
yes, they had ale.
Yeah. So.
Yep.
But anyways, moving on.
So moving on. Plutarch, who we mentioned a little bit earlier, wrote, and I quote, "A rich and beautiful city where every common man and every man of rank studied to adorn it." The Hellenistic culture had a strong influence, and the Greek language was, in fact, the official language of the courts. So it shows you, like, the Greek influence of the area, and of course the alliance, you know, that we had with Mithridates. Yes, it was called Pontus. It was called something else, but it was more or less Greek. Greek culture. You know, so there was a hierarchy with the way they had everything set up in the empire and in the cities. Tigran had divided Greater Armenia into 4 strategic regions, or viceroyalties, who were run by their own viceroys. I guess that would be like the equivalent of, like, somewhat of a governor, right?
Yeah,
or like,
I guess,
maybe a little
mayor.
No, governor would be a higher rank. Right.
Okay.
So they were their own viceroys. Below the viceroys were the nakharars, or high nobility, and then after that there was a lower nobility called the sebus, and then we had the, you know, good old friends, the azats, followed as the lower
the freemen.
The freemen, yes. You know, a little reminder about the azats, just in case, was the azats, or freemen, were members of the cavalry, the elite forces of the imperial army. The azats were trained from childhood in fighting on horseback, highly skilled in their use of swords, bows, and other types of, things. Each Azat cavalryman on the battlefield wore armor and extended it to the horse itself. So the emperor's royal guard was also selected from members of the aristocracy. So that was a little quick reminder of who the Azats were. Now, here comes the bad news. After all the glorious things we've just talked about, the glam and glitz of Tigranakert, it was attacked by the Romans in 69 BC.
Of course it was.
Headed by another person who was from the proconsul that we mentioned in the previous episode, who had gold poured down his throat by Mithridates. So I guess this might have been his successor. And it was this guy by the name of Lucullus. And they broke in through the western side of the capital after defeating our friend Mithridates, or kind of defeating his forces to the west, not necessarily Mithridates himself. The Romans laid siege to the city, caring very little about what was built. And again, Tigranakert.
Why would they? They didn't build it.
Well, of course, valid point. But at the same time,
It was probably more beautiful than what
the city itself. It's like, wouldn't you? But wait a minute, that's a good conversation point. Wouldn't you think? Well, since we're going to attack these guys and take it over, might as well keep some things intact, right?
Well, I mean, listen, it has to do with hatred, I think, because, here's the thing, throughout history, you look at everything that still stands today from Greek architecture to Roman architecture and this and that, and they've been attacked, they've had wars and things like that, but at least they weren't fully destroyed, there was some respect towards those architectures, I guess. And for you to, I don't know, again, this is all assumption, I wasn't there, I don't know, but I feel like the fact that they didn't even care about the architecture, and I'm sure it was beautiful, especially with Armenian architecture going way back, the detail work they did, to not care and destroy it, that's some evil in there.
It would have been amazing to see. I don't know. I don't think there's any sort of depictions, not too many descriptions, at least from what we saw and found. But it would have been amazing to, again, this kind of stuff makes you want to try time travel and see what that was like.
Again, and my opinion is a lot biased because of what, with current situation we've seen done to our historical sites through, Turkey and Azerbaijan. And that kind of, I don't know, it just, the vision came of them, obviously these were the Romans, but in order to do that, when you're conquering a city, you don't go in there with the thought of destroying every building. You're just going to conquer for it to be yours, right? That's the whole idea. Why would you destroy it?
But here's a thought, and it doesn't mean anything. They were after a guy, and Mithridates was the reason why they attacked Tigranakert. It wasn't because of Tigran. Now, Mithridates fled to Tigranakert to basically get away from what we were just talking about his western forces being conquered by the Roman legions, right? By this guy Lucullus.
Yeah.
So maybe Mithridates was this hated, right? Where we're like, we don't care where he hides, we're just going to destroy it until we find him.
Yeah, that could be
right?
it too. But still, like,
Mithridates must have been pretty hated because I don't know. I don't think this had anything much to do with the Armenians, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally.
Well, we don't know.
Anyway, after the siege of Tigranakert, which included the destruction of statues, temples, and the city was basically set on fire, the Romans took gold, silver, they rummaged and pillaged a lot of things. Most of the citizens fled to the countryside. The great city wasn't really able to recover after this point to its pinnacle glory of what we were describing earlier.
Yeah. Well, when you take that kind of damage, it's hard to to rebuild, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Well, after the siege of the Romans to Tigranakert, we want to talk about the defeat of the Roman legions. That's a very important part that took place. So after a number of battles against the Roman invaders, Mithridates' force of about 4,000 retreated into Armenian territories under the protection of Tigran. And it was during this time, with the Romans moving in from the west, Mithridates retreating, Tigran's two sons, Zare and Tigran the Young, again, we kind of talked about this in the last episode, had attempted the uprising with some of the nobles. Again, these two bastards. The Parthians were conspiring with the Romans, obviously, who had their own internal struggles with the gladiator uprising. Again, we talked about this, first episode, to take Greater Armenia by force. Lucullus demanded the handover of Mithridates. So again, this is going back, I guess, obviously the whole destruction and everything. But again, they didn't have to do that. Tigran, of course, refused, and it's safe to say this would have meant war.
That's pretty bold, right?
It's also loyalty.
Yeah,
he's talking about.
But again, it's pretty bold in a sense where he could have. Again, I'm not questioning his fortitude, but he could have backed down because we're talking about the Romans. Right, he could have made some sort of deal, whatnot, but he's like, no, not happening.
That comes from, there's a few things involved, and I know Tigran was a very smart politician, warrior. He knew a lot about battle, and I think for him, obviously, listen, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we thought these were Greek or Armenia or whatever. There was a bond, there was a relationship. It was almost like two brothers.
Sure,
and and back then, your honor, your word was everything, right? So that's number one. Number two, I think he felt that he had the strength to take them down. He had the confidence.
But here's the thing. In this time period, it looks like all at the same time, you had the Parthians from the south, you had the Romans from the west, and then internally, you had your two sons trying to dethrone you.
That's
right?
a lot. That's a lot to deal with.
It's not two fronts, it's three fronts.
And one internal.
One including internal, yeah. So, again, it could have forced anyone to buckle and try to strike some sort of deal and try to deal with everything else diplomatically. But now he's just like, no to the Romans.
Well, that says a lot about his...
Of course.
His strength, his I guess, I don't know, and just having to be that mentally strong to be able to...
And again, to your point, he might have kind of been confident enough to know that his forces could have possibly held off and defeated the Romans.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
you got to have a level of confidence.
Well, because of this decision, basically the war between Armenia and Rome was inevitable.
Yeah, that's where things get a little hectic after this.
Definitely.
Lucullus entered Armenia after this, as we mentioned, in the spring, precisely about the spring of 69 BC. His plan was to enter Armenia from the west. The Romans knew that the only way to take on Armenia was to take it down with a two-front attack. And as I mentioned, the Parthians and the Romans were kind of conspiring with one another to see, because I think the Parthians knew they couldn't take on Armenia by themselves. So they sought help from the Romans. And the Romans are kind of trying to blast east. Like, okay, well, let's see what we can do about this, right? Tigran's forces anticipated this. Plutarch, the Greek philosopher and historian, noted that the attacks by the Romans were at best a military blunder. And what we mean by that, he wrote, and I quote, "He, Lucullus, seemed to be making a reckless attack, and one admitted on no saving calculation, upon warlike nations, countless thousands of horsemen, and a boundless region surrounded by deep rivers and mountains covered in perpetual snow." In other words, they might have misunderstood and underestimated the region and what it held in comparison to what the Armenian forces and whoever was with their alliance knew about the region. Yeah. We know that about World War II,
Artsakh.
Exactly. Hitler entering into trying to snowplow through Russia, and in that sub-zero weather, what happens? Your soldiers aren't used to this.
Yeah.
Right. And again, it's not actually sub-zero weather, but just the land. They're mountains and valleys and whatnot, and they're not familiar with this.
Of course, and the people who live there or around the region, they know everything about it. So. So definitely. That was a mistake on his end.
Yeah, so it seemed like he was making a mistake by just kind of headlessly trying to go right through the area, and we'll find out that this kind of backfired.
Basically, if you think about it, Lucullus seemed arrogant, to say the least, right? Especially after what they did in Tigranakert. Tigran and his advisors many of them who were high priests, decided to take on the Romans on the banks of the river Arsanias. Arsanias, that's almost like Arsine, like, or, I don't know why that came to mind. But anyway, so where they felt this would be a decisive victory for them, basically. The Armenian cavalry began to attack and push the Roman legions back towards the western frontier, where Mithridates took over with the combined force of Armenian and Pontic forces and liberated Cappadocia and Pontus itself. After this crushing defeat, the Roman Senate recalled Lucullus and his forces back to Rome. So there you go.
Yeah, so it looks like Mithridates, I mean, again, there isn't enough information, but it looks like he kind of hung around after he retreated, right? And kind of regathered himself.
I got to say, I'm almost like certain at this point, like there was a special brotherly relationship between them. And I mean, you're talking about how many years of battles they protected one another and supported one another and never betrayed one another.
Nope.
And I think that's one of the reasons why till this day Greeks and Armenians have
makes you wonder.
Yeah, have that brotherly connection, because it doesn't matter, you know, you meet a Greek, it's like meeting an Armenian. It's like this. It's bizarre.
Most people would say it's because we share a common enemy, quote unquote.
No,
I mean, but you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to get into politics, but most people would think this.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's the thing.
Besides the cultures sharing.
But there is truth to that, because if you talk about a common enemy, so if you go all the way back to Tigran's or even previous to that, you know, it seems like the Greeks and the Armenians stuck together no matter what, and even through Armenians and Greeks adopting Christianity and everything that happened with the genocide, and until this day they are. I don't think I've ever seen a Greek and an Armenian fight. Like, it's just it's impossible. They just drink, enjoy life,
lots of food.
Yeah, there you go. So I guess it went all the way back to Tigran. You know.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
amazing.
It possibly could.
Yeah,
you know. Anyway, at this point, after Lucullus was recalled and sent back to Rome, with these defeats, if you will. Lucullus and the Romans realized that the Armenians were not an easy opponent,
obviously,
as had many other forces and peoples, you know, during the southern conquests. Right, they were dealing with a formidable foe for the Romans.
Yeah,
that this effort would take far more manpower and effort, of course, over the course of many years. After Lucullus, who was a proconsul. He was replaced by a man named Pompey, not the city, and he was placed in charge of the future expeditions. And the Parthians had negotiated deals with the Romans to perhaps, I don't know, open up a second attempt, right? I mean, why would you, you know, even after slight defeat, you know, it would be kind of silly for you to bow down.
Parthians didn't give up, huh?
No. I mean, it looked like they had a chip on their shoulder from, you know, Tigran's exchange program.
Yeah.
I'm gonna revisit that. Sorry.
No.
But you know, this might have had a lot to do with when Tigran was younger, serving in that royal court. And also, here's another little interesting tidbit: somebody who actually decided to join forces with the Parthians. Dun dun dun.
Oh.
Tigran the Young. His son just wouldn't go away.
Jesus.
Yeah. So that was his third son, by the way.
Yeah.
You know. Tigran the Young ended up marrying the daughter of the Parthian king, Artashat III. What a traitor. I mean, if it wasn't enough that you tried to dethrone your father, now all of a sudden you go marry one of your worst enemies' king's daughter.
Man, I mean, talk about that. I mean, this has to also... psychologically, I don't know if Tigran was an abusive dad or just neglected him or whatever it was, but man, do you have that much hatred towards your own father, or I should say envy or jealousy to be in the throne?
Or he was a power-hungry kid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, who knows?
And just like a lot of kids who, you know, and this is very important to talk about, and this is not just with kingdoms. And if you look at it, even in families, rich families, if you look at it, right, the kid who grows up seeing the successful dad with money, businesses, and so forth,
Sure.
there are multimillionaires.
Sure.
You know, they try to become them, but obviously, especially people who build their empires, you know, from zero to nothing, and those kids don't understand the value, the struggle, this and that. And then what happens is when they try to do that and they're not successful, what happens? Hatred towards the father.
Okay. I guess we just had our psychology lesson for the day.
Yeah,
It's true.
sorry.
No,
Just,
it's
you
true.
know.
But it's you wonder, again, his first son died, right? His second son, we don't really hear much about. Now this kid, he just seemed like he was relentless. I mean, we got to give him that much. He just wouldn't stop.
But again, to be relentless towards your father,
True.
there has to, and obviously we don't know what it was, but there had to, or the mother was, the one who was kind of,
Well, according to some historians, that wasn't
we don't know if it's
necessarily.
true or
Yeah,
not.
we don't know if that's necessarily true because look, the mother was Mithridates' daughter.
yeah,
So if Mithridates and Tigran had maintained this friendship or relationship, and they had each other's backs through, hell and back, basically, you may have to question what some of these historians may or may not have, tried to unfold or found out, whatever the case is. But again, we'll
or
leave it
even
at
put
where
something
it was.
between them.
Maybe,
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah.
But one thing's for certain is the third son,
yeah,
right, was out of his bloody mind.
yeah,
Right?
Well,
That's a given.
yeah. And here's the thing: Tigran the Young led the Parthian troops against Greater Armenia, pretty much reaching the gates of Artashat in 67 BC. The Armenian cavalry came to the rescue, basically demolishing the Parthian forces and gates over time. All of the focus in the south and the battles that preceded these new conquests had weakened the western fronts.
Yeah, I mean, focusing on everything that was going on in the south and internally.
Yeah.
Now the western side's kind of left a little exposed.
So, and this continues. And this kid, Tigran the Young still would not relent after most of the Parthian forces were taken out. He just, he wouldn't give up.
No, he wouldn't give up.
He took the remainder of the forces and tried again to lead another charge from the south, this time joined by some of the Nakharars and the nobles from Sofin and the Nakharas from Korduk.
Yeah.
So
and again, these were somewhat Armenian regions, right?
Yeah.
Even before Tigran II had conquered these areas, as we discussed in the first episode, or in part one of this series, was Tigran the father brought these people together, these different groups of more or less Armenians, brought them together, and then the son basically took them to go attack Tigran now.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, and Tigran was basically facing three enemies from multiple fronts. I almost want to, strangle this kid. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's kind of getting me a little heated, man.
And so Tigran the Young led factions of Romans to the gates of Artashat again in 66 BC, using passages familiar to the Greek king's treasonous son, basically.
Yes.
So he was basically giving away the information.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember
the maps? I guess you could say.
And here's another Game of Thrones reference. Remember when what's his name, the little guy, basically went back to King's Landing. And showed all the tunnels for people. It's literally like Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So by doing this, the Parthians managed to get some of the land back, but in turn, they suffered some revolting themselves with the high-ranking Nakharars or nobles who sought to get independence from the Parthians as well. It's just a cluster of treachery and using another for personal gain. So it was just like, they got some lands back, but
the same people they had help from now all of a sudden turned on them and said, well, okay, bye. We're going to take control of whatever whatever we
wants
got.
Their own piece of pie, So
I mean, it was just backstab central, man. After all this, Tigran really took matters into his own hands. Rode by himself, or more or less with himself, I'm sure he took some people with him, to meet this proconsul Pompey, as we mentioned earlier, who took over for Lucullus. Who, just by that showing, was impressed by the courage that the great king had shown in meeting him personally. Tigran offered lasting peace by offering the exchange of Cappadocia, Syria, Phoenicia, Iberia, Albania, Adiabene, I still can't say that properly, among other territories as well. So now this turned into like some sort of deal where you have lands being exchanged for maybe peace, right?
Yeah.
Like, how much longer is this going to go on, right? It just seemed like everyone's trying to get a share of everything and whatnot, and I'm sure everyone just kind of had enough, right?
Yeah.
This pretty much sealed the fate of the expansion of the Armenian Empire. However, the positive thing in it is the Treaty of Artashat, which was signed or agreed upon between the Armenians and the Romans and whatnot, did ensure that that Greater Armenia would remain intact and untouched. Pompey agreed to these terms without further losses being incurred on both sides. The battles came to an end. Now there's an interesting ending to this part, the part of it all. The crazy son, he still wouldn't go away, by the way. Tigran the Young, when he learned of the Treaty of Artashat, you guys are gonna love this. It's just, guy wouldn't stop. He lost his mind, it seems, that he wouldn't be taken over as the king of Armenia or the emperor of Armenia, that his father would retain the title.
Yeah.
Right? So what did he do? He decided to take his Parthian army and go after Pompey.
Wow. This guy, what a moron.
Kid's a mess, right? Can we please check to see if he was really his father's son? I mean, honestly, like, where did this bat out of hell come from? It just wouldn't stop.
Unbelievable.
I'm telling you, this kid wouldn't go away, right? You know, so in the first episode, we had a character, at least I did. I had a character I really liked in Mithridates, and in this episode, I have a character I can't stand. Like, who is this kid?
Yeah, he reminds
What
me
a
of like
shame.
some really jackass character from like a comedy horror type of movie that just won't die. Like every time you kill it, it still comes back.
It comes back.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Wow.
And one of those horror movies or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, Pompey arrested him for trying to turn on the Romans and then was taken back to Rome. Bravo. Not as an Armenian captive, but as a Parthian captive representing King Hrahat III, whose daughter he married.
Yeah.
Right? So
I gotta say that's actually big of Pompey to do that, because he didn't disrespect Tigran.
The treaty and Tigran, yes.
Knowing that, hey, I know it's your son, but I also know what he's done, and I'm not gonna hold it against you because you're blood, you know.
Well, he was going after the Romans.
Yeah.
He turned to everything.
Yeah.
Forget the Armenians.
Yeah.
Forget my dad. Forget the Parthians. I'm going after the Romans for basically, I don't know. This kid was nuts. Kid was nuts.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, it's unbelievable. I just, well, here's the thing. Tigran the Great suffered some huge losses of land throughout these years, but he managed to protect Greater Armenia, and his final years of being emperor sustained and strengthened the wealth and the prosperity of Greater Armenia. He actually cut back on troops and dismantled the war machine in a way, and focused the resources more on trade and economy itself. So, it was just more about we're at peace. Let's not worry about war anymore because we have these treaties. We're not going to be attacked. Yeah, we have enough strength. If we're attacked, we can protect ourselves, but we don't want to be conquering anymore and expanding and threatening. It was more about, now let's enjoy life. Let's, make money,
absolutely.
and prosper. And these years and of itself strengthened Armenia as a whole for centuries to come.
Mm-hmm.
And in 55 BC, the great king Tigran the Great passed on, ending his reign of 40 years, which is a long time.
Yes, it was. Yeah. He made a noble decision, and Tigran the Great was a man of culture, it seems, and wisdom, much like Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
He did what he needed to do to conquer, but at the same time, from the sound of everything that we've gone through, or what we've learned, is he didn't necessarily have to do everything by force.
Yeah.
Sure, there might have been some, stiff arming and whatnot in diplomatic or political ways. It's normal. You walk in with a stronger army, other people bow down to you, right? Or maybe agree to terms just to protect their people. So where diplomacy comes in. And it didn't seem like he was a terrible, terrible individual that, ravaged and pillaged people to get what he wanted, right? He knew, it seemed like he knew when he was, and again, the last portion of everything that we've talked about, kind of knew where he might have been either in over his head, or what I think is most important, he was protecting his people. Because if he decided, in my opinion, to maybe keep warring it out with the Romans, who else would have, joined forces with them just to take over those lands?
And here's one point I want to make. When he passed, he was 85 years old.
Yes.
Especially back then, I don't think life expectancy was...
At least that's what we're told. But
Yeah.
you look at some of these philosophers and whatnot, they look like they lived pretty decent, 70s.
Really?
Late 60s, early 70s, but 85 was long.
For a king,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah.
for
85
a
was
king,
long. Yeah.
And, him taking over, at the age of 55, was it 50 or 45?
45.
45,
yeah.
So, to be king for that long, can you imagine, for example, having a president for 50 years?
40 years.
40 years.
Wow.
That's a long
Yeah.
time. That's how many generations.
Yeah.
So, and everything he did to pretty much expand the Armenian Empire and till this day, everybody, and obviously the Armenian Empire continued after him.
Yes. Yes,
and,
it did.
and it wasn't like it ended when he passed, but
No, I believe his son took over, Artavast, the
yeah,
youngest one.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Well, one day we should do an episode about that.
And we want to mention, guys, all this research that's been done, it's a condensed version from everything that we've researched. I mean, if we were to sit there and actually read and talk about every detail, I think we would go through 56 episodes of just Tigran.
God,
So
it's so long.
these are things that we gathered to kind of to highlight, what his reign was about and who he was as a person, and I hope we have done that for you, and the goal is to spark interest for you to go do your own research and learn more things about him that we may have not covered. And we will cover, Artavaz.
I'm
and
sure.
continue
Yeah,
on that.
absolutely. And look, if any of you have any questions about some of the sources that we dive into, don't hesitate to ask.
Yeah.
We'll try to answer as best as we can.
Yeah.
And lead you down a certain path. But I was actually shocked when the first couple days when I opened up some more sources to do more research about Tigran. It was a lot of information, a lot, and there's a lot more detailed information. But like you said, this is kind of the best of it.
By the way, to our listeners and followers, we want to interact with you. So please don't be shy. If you have questions, you can we have a number. We've mentioned this in episode 1, I believe. You can call, and the number, it obviously for our international friends, it might be a little bit difficult, but the number is 818-579-2112. You can leave a voicemail with your question and we'll answer it in the next episode.
Or suggestions.
Suggestion, doesn't matter. Feedback, everything. We appreciate all the feedback we get from Instagram and Facebook. You can reach us on Facebook. Again, Mer Herosner. Instagram, send us a message, questions, feedback, whatever you want. we'd love to interact with you. And again, if you call in, we'll definitely play your question also on the on the podcast and answer it for you. But as far as that's pretty much it. As far as Tigran the
this
Great
wraps
goes,
up
it's
Tigran's
kind of
saga.
a sad
I wouldn't say sad. I think it sounds more like a happy ending. The guy did what he needed to do to protect his people, and his people
Well, what
prospered.
I mean is sad that we're not going to talk about him. That's what. I meant.
Well.
He is the reason Mer Herosner.
This is true.
Yeah,
this is true.
we'll talk about him and other things too. But
look, we've spent 2 episodes talking about one man and his journey.
Yeah,
right.
And he is the reason
that's pretty significant.
Mer Herosner was created and from your vision and that's why we're here and we're proud of it. Speaking of Mer Herosner, I want to mention that Tigran the Great sculpture is shipping. So don't forget to go and order it, guys. This is a special piece. We have limited stock left. Like I said, this is just a one-time thing. We're not going to be, this is not a toy where we have thousands of on the shelves. This is a collectible. We're making only a limited amount, and that's it. So, and like I said, they come with a certificate of authenticity, numbered, registered to your name. And if you ever want to pass it on to somebody else, you do need to let us know to transfer that registration. We want this to be a valuable item. It is a valuable item. And then we're going to start working on the Vartan production soon. We mentioned that last episode as well. We have an amazing surprise coming. So make sure you're following us on Instagram. We have the next piece coming up.
Expect new artwork by next week.
Next week we'll announce our third,
ladies.
Third sculpture. We'll announce that. And then after that, the fourth one. We're also going to be doing almost like digital artwork, possibly downloads. We're still debating on which way we're going to go. We're going to do canvases, of different, heroes, characters, through the vision of Mike. Obviously, some of these people, we don't know what they look like. So it is a vision of what we think
and
there's historical facts.
Yeah, there's some descriptions with certain individuals that have been passed on over the centuries, right? Yeah. And at least I try to base it as much as I possibly can off of this. But unless you guys have a selfie with somebody, please send it over.
Yeah,
I'd love to see it.
Yeah,
please.
Now, I do want to mention also, again, our project with miasin.org for Popok animation. If you already donated, thank you. We appreciate it. But we want, we need more. We need to help this project. It's actually starting already. I think it's going to launch next week or something like that. Last time I spoke with them. Yeah. So that the places have been reserved already. The computers have been purchased, I believe. So everything's moving along. I think from next month, if I'm not mistaken, they should start already offering the classes to the children. Yeah. So it's big. So again, it's miasin.org and /Popok animation, or you can just directly, give it to me or donate. I should not give it. Donate to miasin.org and you can put a comment what it's for. So again, we appreciate it. If you have donated, thank you. If you haven't, please go donate, help, whatever you can. $5, $10, $20, every amount helps. And again, support us by going to merherosner.com and helping us by buying the sculpture, the t-shirt, the mug, doesn't matter. And don't forget about the raffle. Send us your info.
Yeah, guys, and we're giving away free stuff.
Yeah.
Send us your name and your email address, and that would enter you into a raffle.
Yeah. And by the way, it doesn't matter where in the world you are. We will ship it to you. So don't worry. This is not just for U.S. audience. So I know we have listeners all over the world. But that's pretty much it as far as this episode. Do we have anything else to add, Mike?
No.
Well, it was great. So it was great talking about him. Honestly, from day one, we always wanted to dig into his life. And from the research, we've learned a lot. Obviously, like I said, this is a condensed version. So, but I guess until the next episode, right?
Until the next episode.
All right, everyone, take care.